The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is a House Concurrent Resolution that calls for an Article 5 Convention of States. We had a similar resolution earlier this session for a slightly different purpose. This resolution is for the sole purpose of proposing an amendment to the United States Constitution for a balanced budget. I don't think it really needs any more description than that. I reserve the right to close.
Is there discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, we had a long debate on this subject when it was coming through here on several occasions, including last year. You know, I want to start off by saying, you know this side's against it, and some of you are against it, but we're going to vote for it anyways, evidently. You know, I stated earlier today, and I'm going to be talking for a while, so relax. I stated earlier today, Senator from Oregon's going to vacate. Look at him. I don't blame you. I stated earlier today that this session and the last was an opportunity lost. You know, we had the chance to come in here and work together to resolve real problems facing West Virginia. We could have worked together to do great things. Instead, we've embarked on an ideological bent, and this is the greatest example of it, opening up our entire U.S. Constitution. You know, I figured out how gridlock occurs. We've seen it happen here in West Virginia the same way it happened in Washington, D.C. Thank you. You know, one side is in power for a long time, and the other side has to sit and feel that they haven't had a say in government. And suddenly the pendulum swings the other way. And the senator, the majority leader, and I have had this conversation before, that when the new party that gets in power tries to pass bills that are ideological, in grounded in ideological beliefs, and they believe they're doing the right thing, don't get me wrong, but every one of those bills get voted upon along party lines. Think how many 1816 votes have been up there on the board. My friend from Logan's been playing it at the lottery every night. He says it's the magic numbers, 1816. Now, won $4. It's about all we're going to win. But you know, with every one of those votes, we build a little divide for us. We forget when we were in the minority that we said we have to work together, have to work across the aisle, have to do the things that are good for our state. We forget that and we start to build a chasm. And you know, that chasm gets a little bigger every time one of those votes take place. And both sides still try to work together on the good things, but the ideological things we can't work together on. Just like when Newt Gingrich came in and replaced Tip O'Neill, and the cooperation and camaraderie that existed in Congress for so many years began to dissipate. And with each one of those votes, the divide gets a little wider, the bridges get harder to build, and then something really drastic happens. In Congress, it was when they tried to impeach Bill Clinton, whether you thought he should have been or not. It was an insult to many in the minority. Here, we had the conferees issue. It was insulting to many on this side. We're over that. But it's hard to repair that kind of damage to relationships. There's not one of not one of my colleagues on the other side I don't like. And I would have to guess you all would say the same about us. Present company accepted. But you know, when you build that divide and it can't be breached anymore, no matter how good the proposal is from that side, we can't trust it. It creates gridlock. That's what we've done here in my first two sessions in the Senate. Now, we've considered a host of special interest bills. We tried to give one shop in a county that had voted not to have any alcohol the right to sell alcohol. You can add to that list right to work and prevailing wage and RFRA, Common Core, among many others, but most of all, the desire to rewrite the United States Constitution. All with questionable basis in fact, and some with no facts on which to base it. Taking up our time with these issues has made us ignore our roads, our PIA crisis, the wages of our workers and state employees and teachers, and most of all, our fiscal deficit, which we will now be visiting each other again during the summer to try to resolve. This is how gridlock is created. And now we're coming back again with an Article 5 constitutional resolution. And here's what bothers me the most about this resolution is none of us and none of you cannot say that our entire way of life in the United States, the longest surviving government in world history, not in modern history, not in the last 200 years, in world history since the first government was formed, this is the longest surviving one. And we're going to screw with it. Every constitutional scholar, from Justice Antonio Scalia to James Madison, realized that this was the most dangerous thing we could ever invoke in our Constitution. That's why they made it so hard. That's why they made it so hard to hold one and then to get anything passed from one. And we're playing with the devil here. Because not only is there no precedent, but the bill we passed to control the delegates could very well be a fantasy. Because many say there is no control over the delegates. No matter what restrictions you put on them, when the convention is convened, they can do whatever they want. Let me give you a great example. Our Constitution. Those delegates were sent to that constitutional convention with a mandate to simply, for the sole and express purpose, now let me get this right, for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. You know what they did? They wrote a whole new Constitution. Did pretty well. It's the most amazing document. As a lawyer, I can tell you it's the most amazing document that I've ever got to put my hands on. It has helped us through changes that nobody could have anticipated in the 1700s. I mean, could you imagine going from farming to the Industrial Revolution, from slavery to freedom for everybody, to protecting religions of kinds and natures that the folks that were here in 1776 couldn't even imagine. They couldn't have imagined a Muslim, couldn't imagine a Buddhist, couldn't imagine a Catholic probably. But yet that document has seen us through all of that. And now we're going to take the risk because we're just one little state legislature amongst all the states. But you only have to count till they get to the magic number, and then this will begin. To some of us, and I know some of you, and I don't hold it against you, you think that's a great thing, to be able to revisit the U.S. Constitution, to be able to write it in your image the way you believe the federal government should or should not be. But I say you're playing with fire. Because for one thing, you don't know who's going to be there by the time this happens. You don't know if the last state will pass this resolution next year or 50 years from now. Think how the pendulum has swung from one side to the other. It may be people who are against the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. Maybe somebody who's against the Second Amendment. And if they are, there won't be very many people carrying concealed weapons. Maybe somebody who's no longer for the states. You know, I was looking through some things today. the Constitution of the new states of America is a referendum called for where the states are dissolved and replaced by regional governments answerable only to a new national government. The Revolutionary Communist Party, and believe me, the Tsar in Russia never thought the communists would be in control. Neither did the ones living in Taiwan now think the communists would ever be in control. They have a new socialist republic in North America. It's already written, their Constitution. The Constitution 2020 movement is funded by George Soros and is supported by Eric Holder and Marxist law professors all over the country. They want an entirely new government based on socialism. So what are we doing here? Why in West Virginia, with all the problems we have, roads, our deficit, PEIA, wages, attracting business, bringing in new jobs, are we fooling with this now for the 15th millionth time, it seems like? Allowing me to stand up here and take up your time today. It's the least punishment I can inflict on you. But you know, this is how gridlock is formed. And in all seriousness, it really does make me sad. Because even though I had to come down here in the minority, I was sure my friends across the aisle would join me in doing what was right for West Virginia. You know, Lenin said one time, not the Beatle Lenin, the Marxist Lenin, said a little revolution every now and then is a good thing. And you guys got a little revolution a little bit in 2014. But what did we really do with it? What did we squander? An opportunity to join together to rid ourselves of government waste, an opportunity to join together to straighten out rules and regulations that have been embedded in our state and held our state back for so many years. We could have done that. There's good people over there. There's good people over here. You know, just like the budget thing that occurred in finance the other day. Surely you don't think we're too dumb to read. Surely you know we can read the Constitution. We can help. We could be a part of it. We could have helped do good things for our state instead of right to work and prevailing wage and protecting people who fear their religion's being trampled on when there's not a bit of evidence for it. Protecting against voter identification fraud when we don't have one case of it. Trying to micromanage our school system when none of us are educators. We're legislators, but we are trying to micromanage our education system. You know, I feel like I've wasted a lot of time down here. I've enjoyed every minute with all of you. And I've enjoyed being here. But I don't feel like I've accomplished anything. I don't feel like the time away from my family and my business was worthwhile because of things like this. Because of these silly kind of ideological votes that we are forced to take, and forces me to stand up and rail against them. Sometimes I'm the only one, I realize that. But I just don't understand how human beings are ever going to get on the right track if a group this intelligent, this much that has the public in their heart, can't get on the right track. With every bill forced down the throat of the opposition, every vote that ignores the facts but yet proceeds 18-16, every time something bad happens that is an insult or a slight to the other side, despite our efforts to forgive and to work together, every bill, every cause championed by the majority will be distrusted. I don't care who the majority is. Every motive will be suspect. No matter how good in your hearts you believe things are going to do better for our state, they can't be trusted when it's come to this, when it's come to what we've done in the last 60 days. Nothing gets done easily anyways. Making 34 people see the same things the same way is like herding cats. But now we've created gridlock. This is what has happened in our legislature, the people's legislature. We've made it much more difficult to help the people who've sent us down here, who count on us to come down and represent them and protect them. And the blood is on the party in power's hands. You are the leaders. Opportunities lost. When we had the opportunity to do great things together, we're attacking the United States Constitution. When the only things that we've accomplished drove us apart, that's failure. Together we could have done great things. Together we could have made West Virginia the state we all know it is, and we could have made the outside world believe it is. Instead of having them call us creepy, they could have called us great. Instead of building a chasm, we could have built bridges. For this session and for many to come, on either side, no matter who's in power, it'll be tough to ever restore those bridges, that camaraderie, that cooperation, that mutual desire to believe in each other to get done what needed to be done for our state. This is how gridlock is created, and we have done it all together. Please vote against this stupid, silly bill or resolution. There is no need to open up the United States Constitution that has served us all so well. Think of your parents and grandparents who came to this country who were starving, who came here because it was the greatest country in the world, and it's still the greatest country in the world. I listened to Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is one of the finest businessmen in the world, one of the richest men in the world. And yet, he has to come out and say, you know what, America, you're doing damn good. Your economy's damn good. Don't listen to the candidates who stoke fear in the hearts of men in order to be elected. How bad is our country getting when people have to come out and tell us we're doing good? You know, I'm a student of history. I love history. Loved it when I was a kid, love it now. And you can see what's happening if you remember history. If you go back to World War II, go back to Adolf Hitler. I would ask if any of you have ever read any of Adolf Hitler's speeches prior to the time he became dictator. You know, after he tried a violent revolution, spent a little bit of time in jail, wrote Mein Kampf, he wised up. He decided he had to come out and be part of the political process in order to control the political process. And he came out of prison and he began his rise to chancellor by preaching about good jobs. I'm going to bring Germany good jobs. It was all about jobs because that's what people need, and they need good jobs. And he preyed upon their fears and upon their concerns for their children. He said, I'm going to bring good jobs for all Germans, for German children, and for German grandchildren. And look what it got us. The greatest propagandist in history, Joseph Goebbels, had a little acronym. In English, it's SERU. All propaganda had to be simple, emotional. It had to be repetitive, and whether it was right or wrong, it had to be unchanging. Think about what we see every day, Democrat or Republican. Propaganda is simple. Gays, guns, abortion, Obama. It's got to be emotional. They're going to take your guns. It's got to be repetitive, whether it's true or not. If it's sunshine outside, it's Obama's fault. It should be raining. And it's got to be unchanging, even when it's silly. And that's what we face here today. So I ask you, my fellow colleagues, to stand up. Show them what you're made of. We know a constitutional convention where our entire U.S. Constitution could be rewritten from top to bottom or completely replaced is not something we want to risk. Whether it needs 2/3 of the legislatures or 100% of the legislatures or 100% of every vote in this country, It's not something we need to risk. The pendulum will swing back the other way. Congress will get things right or we'll throw them out until they get a balanced budget. The federal government will be reined in or expanded depending on what the people need. We don't need to join any group that tells us that what needs to be done is to tinker with the greatest document on earth, the greatest document that means freedom, the greatest document that's been the light to the entire world. We don't need to take that risk here in the state of West Virginia. I ask you to vote no on HCR 36 and every other resolution that begs the country to revisit what has made it the greatest country on earth, the United States Constitution. Thank you.
Sir, further discussion. The senior senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few brief remarks. I'll try to confine to the issue at hand. First of all, the gentleman is correct. The Constitution was miraculous. Well, the word miracle is a powerful word, but it was remarkable in what it did in terms of affecting this nation of our country for the 200 and some years we've been in existence. But I also point out that Article 5 is a part of that great document. And Article 5 was placed there, I guess, when the framers put it together, with some concern that there may be some necessity to amend the Constitution that was not going to be acted on in Congress, but was compelling in the minds of people of the states. And so I think that's why it's there. Now, the gentleman says that the convention is called similar to the articles of our original articles that were not keeping the country together and they needed a constitution. I don't think this Article 5 convention is going to rewrite the Constitution. It simply can propose amendments to the Constitution which have to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. Remember the Equal Rights Amendment? I mean, the Congress proposed that, and for all the battle that went on about that, it didn't make it. One of that kind of merit, depending on which side of that question you were on at the time. And then let's talk about our country has been what it's been, but the concern among many of the citizens is what they see in terms of an economic danger in the future. This summer, there's a book called The Ascent of Money by a scholar named Niall Ferguson. He's a good writer, and he's written about the course of nations, which, by the way, I think we were looking up here, the Roman Empire began in 1753 BC and ended in 476 AD. It existed a long time. But as Niall Ferguson reviewed nations where they established an economy and they sold government bonds and they developed a currency, that many of those nations that have fallen, including Germany, their currency became devalued because of the nature of what occurred in their country. Look at Greece. Greece recently in the last year, because of the fact of the entitlement programs and the expenditures, their bond ratings, their currency, the valuations of currency is an important issue. And a lot of our citizens in America feel that Washington is so broken that they need a message that you just can't keep doing this. And I know there are some economists that think this is safe, to have a $19 or $20 trillion national debt, Mr. President. But there are many citizens who read history, who know it well, who have a different view. And this is a worldview clash. I don't think the Article 5 convention, if it were ever held, and it's far from being called, could pass just cavalier amendments and rewrite the whole Constitution, and 3/4 of the states ratified it. But they may come together and start down this road, as my senator from Upshur in his previous comments on this pointed out, a point I thought was pretty interesting. If we get close to this, or we see the disaster, the bridge is out, then perhaps Congress will act to do something. You know, our currency is the standard currency of the world. People trade around the world in the U.S. dollar. But if you're studying what's happening economically in the world, now the Russian currency and the Chinese currency and different currencies are becoming a currency that they're trading back and forth, and they're not playing off of ours because they're beginning to be worried about the value of our currency. That's there. That's floating around. There's an economic storm out there. We're into new historic territory. And I believe the call for the Article 5 Convention is just simply the cry of people around the country to Congress and say, please, just don't keep kicking the can down the road. And I know we might do that here, but when they kick it and kick it and kick it, eventually we cannot, according to most economists, there'll come a point to where we cannot meet our obligations at the federal level and something dramatic could happen. I think this is just an impulse in our society, a statement, but it's a legal, constitutionally established right for the states to act and say, we want to meet. That's all. Let's not, the remarks that, oh, it'll rewrite the entire Constitution, I can't see that. When they went to do on the Articles of Confederation, when they went and did those, they were charged to write a new Constitution. This is just a constitutional provision that says we might be able to propose an amendment to it that'll require 3/4 of the states to ratify. And you know what? A balanced budget amendment, if it were placed before the states today, would not pass 3/4 of the states. Is it going to pass in Massachusetts? Is it going to pass in California? You know, you can just run the list, the blue states, it's not going to pass. So I don't know what the fear is. It's just simply it's just we're using a provision of the greatest Constitution ever written by our founding fathers in a proper manner to say, if Congress isn't going to act, we're concerned enough to try to call ourselves together to do something about what is the bridge may be out 30 or 40 years down the road. So I don't see how this is so unresponsible or even like a wedge issue or whatever. It's just simply using the constitutional provision. I guess we should just strike it out. But it's there in the greatest Constitution ever written, and we're just simply saying maybe we should get together and take a look at what Washington's doing, Mr. President. So I advocate for this particular resolution.
Further discussion. Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I could talk about all the reasons why we need this particular resolution, and I don't think that there's really any question that we do need this resolution. $20 trillion in debt, over $100 trillion in unfunded mandates, a Congress that's completely out of control. We could go with that, but instead I want to touch a little bit on some of the questions that were raised by the senator from Harrison as it relates to this being an ideological battle. And what I'd like to point out is that if West Virginia adopts this, we'll be the 28th state to adopt this, assuming no other states have done it in the last few days, and I'm unaware of any. In 27 states that have adopted this, I don't believe a single state has adopted this along party lines. There has not been a single state that has had a party line vote to adopt this resolution in 27 states. So the notion that this is somehow an ideological question, that only Republicans are for it and all the Democrats are against, is simply not true. In fact, I'll point out that on the other end of this building, this resolution was passed out just a few days ago. And in that chamber down there, it was not a party line vote. In fact, it was pretty well split. And there were a fair number of the members on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, a fair number of Democrats down there voted for this resolution. And I'll also point something else out that I think is actually pretty interesting about that, the way that broke down. I'm aware of 3 Democrats in the other chamber who this year are seeking office next year to be in this chamber. And of the 3 members of that chamber that are trying to be here next year that are Democrats, there's a total of 7 trying to get over here, but 3 of them are Democrats. And out of those 3 Democrats, 2 of those Democrats voted for this resolution in that chamber, which would lead me to believe that if they do arrive here next year, there'll be 2 more votes for this resolution next year, having already voted for it this year. This is not an ideological question. This is a question of whether or not we want to see our nation go into national bankruptcy. We're there. We're on the edge. We're really just a black swan moment, as it's referred to, away from going over the edge in a way that we cannot recover from. And if we do not get the federal government in line on this particular issue, this nation is going to find out what it's like to be Zimbabwe. It's going to find out what it's like to be Greece. So I do stand in strong favor of this resolution, and I urge the adoption of this resolution. This is the one thing that we can do as a state to rein the federal government in, and I believe that it's an absolute requirement that we do rein this federal government in. So again, I urge the adoption of the resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? Yep. Senator from Ohio? If not, the question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Thank you. Senior Senator from the 15th calls for division of the body. All in favor of the adoption of the resolution will please stand. In favor of the adoption of the resolution, please stand.
This is a vote on House Concurrent Resolution 36, the Article 5 Convention of the States Resolution.
Be seated. Opposed to the adoption of the resolution, please stand. Be seated. Vote being 17 in favor and 16 opposed, more than a majority having voted in the affirmative, I declare the resolution adopted.